All right, cool. So, all right, I'll challenge you on this, and then maybe you can give me some pushback.
Okay.
It's in my opinion that actually let me pull up my document real quick. I've got a specific thing for this.
Is there a lot of questions in it?
No. Well, it's just my position. I mean, I
Oh,
can
okay,
ask
okay.
you. Yeah, I can certainly ask you questions, but I'm just going to give you my position, and then you can tell me if you think anything looks inconsistent or problematic.
Okay.
So, as my name would suggest, I am an anarchist. And so, I'll just tell you my position. First of all, the free market doesn't aim to solve all suffering. It only reduces suffering by preventing violence and encouraging peaceful voluntary negotiation. Number 2, conflict is inevitable due to scarce resources. And to minimize unnecessary suffering, reducing conflict is essential. Would you agree with those?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Now we get into more controversial territory. The best way to minimize conflict is through voluntary association. So avoiding violence. And voluntary association is achievable only through a free market system of non-violence.
Okay.
Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay. Because essentially what I'm saying here is voluntarism is the best way to reduce conflict. And from my proposition, conflict is a thing that universally people would accept is not good. And so I'm positing that voluntarism is the best system to reduce conflict. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on this. I really, there's people that disagree with it.
Well, yeah, the majority of people do. Okay, we're probably going to.
Interesting.
I think most of the debate is going to revolve around the definition of violence and the definition of voluntarism. Because when I say voluntarism, I just mean, like I said before, when I say voluntarism, I mean, it means voluntarily, meaning consenting to certain actions. And many people would disagree that consent is,
Voluntary?
yeah, many people would. Well, many people would disagree that consent is something that we ought to achieve. And
Holy crap! Really?
yes, and well, you'll see soon.
Okay.
Because so like a free market is essentially just a system where everybody consents voluntarily, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where we're gonna get into the problematic areas. I would consider that taxation is non-voluntary, meaning it's non-consensual.
I agree.
Oh, you do? Wait, are you an anarchist?
You know, I've had a lot of people say that I kind of am, so I kind of gotta accept that I might.
All right, comrade. I've got another anarchist here. Okay, well then I don't think you're gonna disagree with the rest of the things I would say. But yeah, essentially I have all these. I would call them my positions, but yeah. So like I said, voluntarism, private property reduces conflict. I believe because I believe that the lack of private property would have far more conflict than having private property. And so for each of these positions, I basically show like the absurdism and the absurd outcome if you don't have these certain things. But
Okay.
yeah, no, it's it's like you said, it's I made it as simple as possible. It's like conflict is bad. We don't like conflict. If everybody can accept with me that conflict is bad, we can move on to the tool to reduce conflict to the maximal amount. And then the tool to reduce conflict to the maximal amount would be voluntary association, meaning people don't use violence on other people. It's very simple, but that is the thing that most people will get hung up on most, where it's like, well, voluntary, we can do non-voluntary things sometimes, right? Like we can steal taxes from people in order to help, like worse off people, right? And it's like, I understand your position. You want to help people that are in need. But the problem is you're creating a contradiction in
conflict.
In conflict, right? And so if you create a contradiction in voluntarism, you open up the gates of hell. If you do not agree that voluntarism is the best way of reducing conflict, then it's like, can you imagine a world of non-voluntarism? And the answer is, it would be horrific. It would be hell, because people can do whatever they want. Slavery. People can do whatever they want to whoever they want, whenever they want, and it's completely justified. In their framework, it would be, if they believe in morality, it would be moral to do these things. And I think, like you said before, like, most people sort of, they put themselves in denial, and they won't ask themselves these foundational questions. It's like, it either is or it isn't, and there's no line to be drawn in between. And that's the problem. Most people think that you can draw a line in between consent and non-consent, but the truth is, there is no line in between those two things, right? According to
they're in opposition.
They're completely in opposition. Yeah,
it's justice, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. It's crazy that you agree with me on that. Oh boy.
I've thought about it myself before. Here, let me bring up something to you. This is something that I've been discussing recently. How do you feel about, in Canada, we made a law to give government subsidies for businesses to hire minorities?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, that's non-consensual to the public, obviously. But also, first of all, subsidies is like, it's cheating. You're cheating. You're giving businesses more money for doing a certain thing, and that interferes with what people truly value. It's like, if people truly valued having minorities in companies, then they would just hire them. And if people don't value that, then they wouldn't. So when you put in this arbitrary law of you need to have more minorities, it's like, what is your reason for that? Why are you implementing this? And they don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
They say it's good, and then if you ask why is it good, they don't know. They don't know why it's good. They don't know why it's good for certain people to, be privileged over others. And their answer would probably be, well, they have like hundreds of years of, what is it? Reparations. They're owed, hundreds of years of reparations. And again, you come into problem. It's like, okay, I don't disagree with restitution, right? I don't disagree with reparations on principle, but the problem is you need proof, okay? And again, if you don't provide proof, we get back to a reductio ad absurdum of, what does this society look like without proof? And to answer, simply, it's hell. A society without proof is hell. So if you
bunch of irrational beings running around just doing things that they don't even know why.
Exactly, and you don't need proof. Like, you wouldn't even have society, because theoretically, if you had court systems, all the judges would, always agree with you, because you don't need proof to prove anything. So, millions of people would take each other to court, and they would always win. And then it would be like, it's contradictory. It doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. But yeah, that's why justification is so important, and people don't understand this. And in a legal system, you have to be completely fair. There cannot be a single contradiction. If there's a contradiction, then the legal system is no longer fair, and it does not help the people.
And that is by definition in opposition to the actual word of justice, where one of the definitions is about fairness. Exactly.
There's no justice, and
yep.
So yeah, I've been doing research on this recently, because like, approaching the debate of capitalism is kind of intimidating, because there's so much to discuss. But I want to get to the fundamentals of it and why it's important. And I think if we discuss the fundamentals, like I told you before, if we talk about the foundation, all forms of arguments always lead back to the foundation. It's because people hold different axioms of belief. They hold different axioms of belief. And they will always talk past each other unless they can agree on certain axioms. And they will never agree on something if they don't hold those same axioms. So a consequentialist and a deontologist who are arguing about applied ethics, they will never be able to agree on anything because their axioms are in contradiction. They will never be able to agree on it because their fundamental principles are different.
Yeah, that's often why, like, one of the statements that I say is people often talk at each other and not with each other. And listening is a skill that just a lot of people, they're not really listening. What they're doing is they're waiting for their chance to speak. Because while the other person's talking, they have an idea pop in their head. And they don't want to forget that idea, so often they'll interrupt just to get that idea out before they forget it.
Yeah. I used to be that way too before. I think the reason most people do that is because it's convenient and it's easy to do that. Because I'm not sure, it might be emotional response, but I think it's more of a, like, they can't juggle a bunch of ideas at once, so they'll probably like hold on to the first thing they see, and that distracts them from being able to listen to people. And
exactly.
And that's probably something why it happens, because it's hard to listen. It's in a conflictory conversation where you like disagree. It's hard to listen and try to prove your point at the same time. It's you have to multitask, and it can be difficult. And I think most people would prefer the convenient path of not listening and just trying to, they're trying to win, or they're trying to prove their point, or they're trying to do whatever.
Yeah. You're an interesting individual. I like this.
So are you, dude. I didn't think people like you existed on Discord. I thought they were just a bunch of like edgelords.
A lot of them are, but there are some individuals that just are willing to put in the effort. They are willing to sharpen their iron.
That is a rare gem to find. What would you call it? A gem in a sea of rot.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I definitely have a lot of things I would want to talk to you about, just because you're open to listening and discussion and critical thinking.
Yeah, I feel the same thing about you. That's why I'm really glad that you asked if I would want to have this discussion. This is awesome.
Hell yeah.
And like I said, with those judge questions that I was using, the less than 3% answer, those less than 3% people, that's the rarity. We went on to have very interesting discussions because they were open to listening and just actually having a discussion.
That is very true. And okay, so do you mind if we talk a little bit about God?
Not at all.
Okay. So I've thought a lot about God because this is part of like the foundation I've been trying to create. And I think the reason that people don't believe in God is because there's not a lot of good evidence to believe that God exists. And what I mean by that is there's no direct link of logical or I need to be more specific. There's no deductive line of reasoning to get to God, and there's no inductive line of reasoning to get to God. So there's no mathematical theorem to find God, and there's no scientific process to find God either. And that's the reason that people don't believe in him. And I will admit to you that I believe most of the reason I believe in God is likely due to my upbringing and sort of this I would try to use a lighter word than indoctrination, but that's sort of what it is. I was indoctrinated into belief of it. And
you're a product of your environment.
Product of your environment.
That was part of your environment.
Yeah, it was a strong part of my upbringing, and it was a foundational belief. Now it's hard to tell whether I believe in him irrationally or not currently. I would say that probably I'd err on the side of irrational belief. But I have discovered some reasons why I think it's more likely that God exists than not. And when I say God, I just mean a being that is at least powerful enough to create the universe.
Yeah.
And so one of the greatest arguments for this is, I'm not really prepared for this. I forget what it's called.
The Kalam?
The Kalam. Yeah, the Kalam. Is it called the Kalam argument?
Yeah, the Kalam cosmological argument, where everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Exactly. So I would relate this to the law of causality. And the way I would do it, and I saw lots of debates about this, and it was crazy to me, dude, because first of all, did you know that the law of causality is a corollary from the laws of logic? Meaning that it is completely irrefutable. It is as irrefutable as the law of identity. And I didn't know this, and this destroys the debates that like hundreds of thousands of people have seen between an infinite universe and a non-infinite universe. And so when you have the law of causality, an infinite universe cannot exist, because the law of causality disproves infinite regress, and it disproves infinity.
Now we're gonna have a disagreement.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so the way I see it, the law of causality is a law of logic, and it is completely irrefutable. Now,
I agree with that.
Okay, now if you agree with me there, then the question is, infinity contradicts with the law of causality, unless you disagree.
That's where I disagree.
Okay, so just so we're clear, actual infinity is the idea that there's never been a beginning. It is only infinite, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this would directly go against the law of causality, which suggests that everything has a cause.
Yeah, because I'm just gonna take a shot in the dark here, try to see if speed this up a little bit. You believe an infinite regress is impossible, right?
Yeah, I believe that the law of causality disproves the infinite regress.
Now, is that because if there is an infinite regress, we would derive at today?
Yes. So because it needs to have a cause. So infinity means there is no cause. But according to the law of causality, there's always a cause.
I don't think infinity means there is no cause, just that there's this infinite set of causes back in time.
Well, isn't that the problem? Because the problem is infinity means there is no cause. It's infinite. Meaning, so like the person who believes in an infinite universe believes that it's in an eternal, in a concrete way of putting it, it's a circle. It's infinite. It goes in a complete circle, and it loops infinitely, and there is no beginning to it. There's no cause to it because it's a circle. And in a circle, you don't have a cause.
Okay, well, do you know the difference between an incomplete infinite set and a complete infinite set?
Yeah, if you're referring to potential versus actual infinity, yes. Potential infinity is where I can count up infinitely, and that is potential infinitely. I could do that infinitely. So I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I could keep going up, and I would only be in potential infinity. Actual infinity is when it actually exists in the world. So is that sort of similar?
No. What I'm getting at is like the number pi, right? It goes on infinitely, right? But it's a complete infinite set. I can't add something to the infinity of pi. It's complete. But say if I have an infinite amount of apples and I add one more apple, this is an example of an incomplete infinite set. I can still add more to this infinity. It's not complete.
Okay. So how would you relate this back to causality?
Because I think what happens when a lot of people say that we would not arrive at today, because if we had an infinite past, is they're using the idea of a complete infinite set, when actually that's not actually correct, because we're still adding on minutes, days, seconds, all that. It's an incomplete infinite set. And if we've had, even though we've had an infinite past, we're still adding on, and it's just like a conveyor belt going by that's been going by infinitely, but I'm looking at it at this point. Since there's an infinite past of an incomplete infinite set, I will arrive at today still, because it is an incomplete set and infinity time has already passed.
Okay, but by that logic, there would be no cause, right? Because it would be infinite always.
No, that doesn't mean that there isn't causes. It just means that these causes have been going on for an infinite amount of time.
Right, I agree, but yeah, I agree that there's causes, and the causes have been going on from an infinite amount of time. But where do you believe there's an initial cause of infinity?
To that, I don't know. This is why I'm agnostic.
Okay. Well, maybe I can change your mind, because according to the law of causality, there must always be a cause. Okay, I think I understand. So you're saying there is a cause, but the cause is infinite?
Well, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's possible that it could be. Because really,
Okay.
I don't know. And that is the thing. Now when it comes to God, in the Kalam cosmological argument, depositing that God is that initial cause, you've now basically broken the logic that you used to get there. And I find that to be a special pleading fallacy, because you're saying everything has a cause except for this.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, say that one more time so I can just so that I can ingrain it.
Okay. With the Kalam, where it's saying, this caused this, this caused this, this caused this, all the way back, and then you get to God and you say, but this didn't have a cause. And I find that to be a special pleading fallacy, because you're saying that this general rule or principle applies, but then all of a sudden it doesn't apply to this.
Yes. So I actually have an answer to this, which I'm not. Well, okay, I'll just say I have an answer to this, and my answer to this is that I believe that God is illogical.
I had a debate a little while ago where we ended up with this. Can God do the illogically? Can God do what is illogical?
Dude, so I had a debate. I'll answer your question, but I just want to say real quick, I had a debate with people, and I didn't know. I was talking to a bunch of I don't know, people in a chat room, and they were all telling me that God can only do what is logically possible, and this kind of intuitively grossed me out, because I've always seen God as the idea of outside of a closed system, which is the universe, and it appears that some people believe that God is within the closed system, and I just disagree with that completely. My understanding of God is that he's outside of a closed system, meaning meaning we can't comprehend, basically, right? We can't comprehend. He doesn't follow the laws of logic, and any answer, he does fall into, if we use logical contradictions, he does fall into the logical contradictions, and that means that he is illogical, right? By necessity. If you fall into a logical contradiction, you are illogical. And so therefore, I believe that God is illogical and he's outside of a closed system of the universe.
So can God be a married bachelor?
Yes.
Can God draw a square circle?
Yeah, exactly. And he can create a boulder he can't lift. Or at least our brains can't compute the idea of something that is illogical. And that's what I would say is happening there.
Can God exist and not exist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, can you see
That's-
that if you
that's what I
take
mean, though.
that, there's absolutely nothing, there's no way to refute anything if I can't even use logic to try to apply to it?
I agree with you. I would say that logic works in the closed system that is our universe.
I know, but I mean,
I would say
It
God is
becomes-
outside
if
the
it-
closed system.
it becomes like impossible to have any arguments or even any justification.
Exactly.
For this.
Exactly. There is no justification for God, and that's the problem. There's no evidence for him.